Don't want to see any of that snot on there, do you?
No.
No. Baked beans.
Yeah.
With a little spice, the chili powder.
Oh,
chili flakes. Sorry.
really?
Yes.
Okay,
They
so...
go.
I can't put my name on this. I won't. Gordon Ramsay said those words standing in a kitchen that smelled like death, and the cameras kept rolling even though the crew was backing toward the door. For nearly a decade, Kitchen Nightmares had followed a formula that worked. Gordon would arrive, yell about frozen food and dirty ovens, redesign the dining room, and send the restaurant off with a fighting chance. But in 2013, he walked into a place in New York that broke that pattern completely. This was not about saving a struggling business. This was about a restaurant that allegedly should never have been serving food to human beings in the first place. Crew members have spoken quietly over the years about footage so disturbing that the network's legal team refused to let it air. They talk about a walk-in fridge that made seasoned camera operators physically ill, about owners who reportedly lied straight to Gordon's face, while staff whispered that customers had been getting sick for months, and about the moment Gordon Ramsay, a man famous for salvaging impossible situations, made a decision that would haunt the show forever. He told them to shut it down. Not after the makeover, not after the relaunch. Right then. So what did Gordon find that was so bad, even Kitchen Nightmares could not fix it? What was in that banned episode that the network buried and never spoke of again? And what does it say about the restaurant industry that a place like this was allowed to operate until a TV crew stumbled through the door? Gordon Ramsay was born on November 8, 1966, in Johnstone, Scotland, and grew up in Stratford-upon-Avon, England, in a household that was often chaotic and violent. His father struggled with alcoholism and moved the family frequently, creating an unstable environment that pushed Gordon toward discipline and control in every other part of his life. He found that control in the kitchen, training under Marco Pierre White, and later working with culinary legends in France. By his early 30s, Gordon had earned multiple Michelin stars and built a reputation as one of the most demanding chefs in the world. His television career began in the late 1990s with Boiling Point, a British documentary that showed his volcanic temper and uncompromising standards in his own restaurant. The success of that series led to more shows, and in 2004, he launched Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares in the UK. The format was simple. Gordon would visit failing restaurants, diagnose the problems, and implement changes designed to turn the business around. The show was a hit, and in 2007, Fox brought the concept to America as Kitchen Nightmares. The American version amplified everything. More drama, more conflict, more editing tricks to make every episode feel like a crisis barely averted. Gordon became famous for his profanity-laced tirades, for throwing food across kitchens, and for confronting owners who refused to admit their restaurants were failing. Audiences loved it. The show became one of Fox's biggest hits, running for 7 seasons and producing over 100 episodes. Each week, millions of viewers tuned in to watch Gordon transform struggling restaurants, and the formula seemed unbreakable. But beneath the theatrics, there was always a genuine desire to help. Gordon understood the restaurant business from every angle, and he knew how hard it was to keep a place afloat. He had seen restaurants fail for 1,000 different reasons, and most of those reasons were fixable. Outdated menus that did not reflect what customers actually wanted. Poor management that created chaos instead of coordination. Lack of communication between front and back of house that left servers scrambling and customers waiting. Owners who were too proud to admit they needed help or too stubborn to accept criticism. Fix those things, give the place a fresh start, and a restaurant could survive. Gordon took pride in that. Every restaurant he saved represented real jobs, real families, real communities. When a restaurant failed, it was not just the owners who suffered. It was the servers who lost their income, the suppliers who lost a customer, and the neighborhood that lost a gathering place. So Gordon fought for these places, even when the owners made it difficult, even when the problems seemed overwhelming. But every now and then, Gordon walked into a situation that was not about saving anything. And in 2013, somewhere in New York, he found one that allegedly crossed a line so severe that it changed the way he thought about the show entirely. The restaurant was a small Italian place in New York, and from the outside, it looked like every other struggling spot Gordon visited. Decent location, outdated decor, and a dining room that was rarely more than half full. The owners had reached out to Kitchen Nightmares, claiming they needed help understanding why customers were not coming back. They blamed the economy, bad reviews from competitors, and changing tastes in the neighborhood. When Gordon arrived, he did what he always did. He sat down, ordered food, and waited to see what would come out of the kitchen. The food was bad, not just poorly cooked, but wrong in ways that suggested deeper problems. The pasta was gummy and oversalted. The chicken was dry on the outside and suspiciously pink in the center. The seafood had a smell that made Gordon push the plate away after one bite. But bad food was normal for Kitchen Nightmares. That was the whole point of the show. What was not normal was the way the staff reacted when Gordon started asking questions. The servers looked uncomfortable. The kitchen staff avoided eye contact. And when Gordon asked to speak with the chef, there was a long, awkward pause before someone finally went to get the owner. That should have been the first red flag. A restaurant where the owner is also the chef, but nobody wants to admit it. Gordon spent the rest of the evening observing the dinner service, and what he saw was chaos. Orders were mixed up. Food sat under heat lamps for 10, 15, 20 minutes before being delivered to tables. And when Gordon finally made his way into the kitchen, he found a space that looked like it had not been properly cleaned in months. Grease coated the walls behind the stoves. The floors were sticky and stained, and the prep station was cluttered with cutting boards that showed signs of cross-contamination, raw meat juices mixing with vegetables that were supposedly ready to serve. But the real nightmare was in the walk-in fridge. Gordon opened the heavy door and stepped inside, and the smell hit him immediately. It was not just the smell of old food. It was decay, rot, the kind of smell that coats the back of your throat and makes your eyes water, the kind that makes your stomach turn before your brain fully registers what you are looking at. The temperature inside was wrong too. Walk-ins are supposed to be kept between 34 and 38 degrees Fahrenheit. This one felt closer to 50, warm enough that you could feel the difference in the air. He pulled out a container of marinara sauce and found a thick layer of mold growing on top, green and fuzzy, spreading across the surface like something alive. He opened a bin of chicken and saw meat that had turned gray and slimy, sitting in its own liquid that had separated into layers of fat and blood. The smell coming from that bin made one of the camera operators gag audibly. There were vegetables that had liquefied in their bags, turning into brown soup that leaked onto the shelves below. Seafood that had expired weeks earlier, still sitting in its original packaging, the dates clearly visible and long past, and ground beef that had separated into layers of fat and discolored protein, the meat so far gone that it barely looked like food anymore. Gordon started pulling things out systematically, lining them up on the prep station outside the walk-in so the cameras could document everything. A bag of lettuce that had turned to black slime, shrimp that smelled like ammonia, pork chops with visible mold growing on the edges, cream that had curdled and separated, cheese covered in a film that was not supposed to be there. Each item was worse than the last, and Gordon's expression shifted from anger to something closer to disgust and disbelief. He found containers with no labels, no dates, filled with unidentifiable substances that might have been food at some point but had decomposed beyond recognition. He found raw chicken stored directly above ready-to-eat salad greens, the juices dripping down and contaminating everything below. He found a cutting board with visible knife marks filled with dried blood and debris that should have been scrubbed away months ago. And then he noticed something that made him stop completely. In the back corner of the walk-in, pushed behind other containers as if someone was trying to hide it, was a large tub of soup. Gordon pulled it out and removed the lid. The soup had separated, with a thick layer of fat congealed on top and a dark liquid underneath. But what caught his attention were the small white specks floating throughout. Maggots. The soup had maggots in it. Gordon has seen bad walk-ins before. It is one of the most common problems on kitchen nightmares. But this was different. This was not just neglect. This was willful ignorance. The owners had to know the food was bad. The staff had to know. They walked past this walk-in every single day. They opened it multiple times during every shift. And yet, they were still pulling food from it and serving it to customers. Gordon pulled out his phone and started taking pictures. He called the crew in to film everything, making sure there was a record of what he was seeing. And then he marched back into the kitchen and demanded to speak with the owners. What happened next, according to people who were there, is where the episode went from typical kitchen nightmares drama to something far more serious. Gordon confronted the owners with the evidence, showing them the rotten food, the expired dates, the cross-contamination, the maggots. He lined it all up on the stainless steel prep station and made them look at every single item. And instead of being embarrassed or apologetic, the owners got defensive. They claimed the food was fine, that restaurants always have a few things that need to be thrown out, that Gordon was being unreasonable. They said he was exaggerating, that the cameras were making everything look worse than it was. One of the owners allegedly said that this was just how small restaurants operated, that they could not afford to waste anything, and that if Gordon had ever run a place on a tight budget, he would understand. That comment, according to crew members, was a mistake. Gordon has run restaurants on tight budgets. He has worked in kitchens where every ingredient mattered, and he knows the difference between being frugal and being dangerous. His anger shifted. The shouting stopped. His voice got quieter, colder, more controlled. He told the owners that what they were doing was not about budget. It was about basic human decency. It was about not poisoning the people who trusted them enough to eat their food. And he wanted to know how long they had been operating like this, how many customers had gotten sick, how many complaints had they ignored, how many times had they looked at that walk-in and decided it was fine. The owners tried to deflect. They blamed their suppliers for delivering bad product. They blamed their staff for not keeping track of dates. They blamed health inspectors for being too strict. They blamed everyone except themselves. Gordon did not let them. He pressed harder. He asked direct questions. When was the last time that walk-in was cleaned? When was the last time they threw out expired food? When was the last time they actually checked temperatures? The owners had no good answers. They stumbled, contradicted themselves, and finally admitted that they had been too busy to worry about those details. Too busy. That was their excuse. They were too busy running a restaurant to make sure the food was safe to eat. The staff, who had been silent up until that point, started talking. And what they said painted a picture that was even worse than what Gordon had found in the walk-in. One server, a young woman who had been working there for almost 2 years, admitted that customers had complained about getting sick. not once or twice, but regularly. She said that at least once a month, someone would call the restaurant the day after eating there to say they had food poisoning. The owners always told staff to apologize, offer a discount on a future visit, and then never mention it again. They never investigated what dish might have caused it. They never checked the kitchen. They just hoped the complaints would stop. Another server said that multiple people had asked to speak with managers after finding hair in their food, or after noticing that their meat was undercooked, or after realizing their seafood tasted wrong. The owners would come out, apologize, comp the meal, and send the customers on their way. But nothing ever changed in the kitchen. The same problems kept happening week after week. A line cook, a man who looked like he had not slept in days, confessed that he had tried to throw out spoiled food multiple times. He said that whenever he would tell the owners that something needed to go, they would tell him to keep it. They would say that if he just cooked it hot enough, it would be fine. If he marinated it long enough, customers would not notice. If he buried it in enough sauce, no one would taste the difference. He said he had been thinking about quitting for months, but needed the job too badly to walk away. The prep cook admitted that they had been reusing oil in the fryers long past the point where it should have been changed. He said the oil was so dark and thick that you could not see through it anymore, and that everything coming out of those fryers tasted burnt and greasy. But the owners did not want to spend money on fresh oil, so they just kept using the same batch, week after week. And then the sous chef, who had been standing quietly in the corner, spoke up. He said that he had been keeping a list of all the things wrong with the kitchen, all the shortcuts the owners were forcing them to take, all the times they had been told to ignore expiration dates or health codes. He said he had been planning to report it to the health department, but was afraid of losing his job and not being able to find another one. Gordon asked to see the list. The sous chef pulled out a folded piece of paper from his pocket, covered in handwritten notes. Gordon read through it, his expression getting darker with every line. The list included things like serving chicken that had been left out overnight, using the same cutting boards for raw meat and vegetables without proper cleaning, ignoring temperature logs for days at a time, and mixing fresh food with old food to hide the fact that inventory was not being rotated properly. Gordon looked at the owners. He asked them if they knew their staff was keeping a list of health violations. They said they did not. He asked if they cared. They said it was just disgruntled employees exaggerating problems to get attention. And then came the revelation that allegedly sealed the episode's fate. According to sources close to the production, Gordon asked if the restaurant had ever been inspected by the health department. The owners hesitated. They exchanged glances. And then one of them admitted, on camera, that yes, they had been inspected. Multiple times. Gordon asked to see the inspection reports. The owners said they did not have them anymore. Gordon said that was convenient. He pulled out his phone and started making calls. Within an hour, he had someone from the local health department on the line, and what they told him made the entire situation even worse. The restaurant had been cited for violations. Not minor violations, but serious ones. Critical violations that should have resulted in immediate closure if they were not corrected within a specific time frame. The health department had given the owners written warnings, deadlines to fix the problems, and explicit instructions on what needed to change. They had been told that their food storage was inadequate, that their temperature controls were failing, that their cleaning procedures were insufficient, and that they were at risk of being shut down if they did not comply. But instead of making changes, the owners had apparently done just enough to pass a follow-up inspection and then immediately reverted back to their old practices. They had cleaned the walk-in on the day of the inspection, thrown out the obviously bad food, and made sure everything looked acceptable. And then, As soon as the inspector left, they went right back to cutting corners. The health department official told Gordon that they had been monitoring the restaurant but had not conducted another surprise inspection because they were understaffed and dealing with higher priority cases. They had assumed the restaurant was maintaining the improvements they had made during the last inspection. They had no idea it had gotten this bad again. Gordon asked the official if they could send an inspector immediately. The official said they would make it a priority and have someone there within 24 hours. Gordon said that was not good enough. He said the restaurant should be closed right now, tonight, before they served one more meal to one more customer. The official said they appreciated his concern, but that due process had to be followed. Gordon hung up. He turned to the owners and asked them directly, why had they called kitchen nightmares if they had no intention of actually fixing anything? Why bring a television crew into a kitchen that was actively violating health codes? What did they think was going to happen? And the owners reportedly gave an answer that made Gordon's decision easy. They said they thought the publicity from being on television would bring in more customers. They thought Gordon's name attached to their restaurant would give them credibility. They believed that if people saw them on Kitchen Nightmares, they would assume the place had been fixed, that it was safe, that it was worth visiting. They were not looking for help. They were looking for a marketing opportunity. They were planning to ride the wave of Kitchen Nightmares publicity for as long as it lasted, hoping it would keep them afloat long enough to figure something else out. Gordon asked if they understood that he had just found maggots in their soup. They said it was an isolated incident. He asked if they understood that their staff had been keeping lists of health violations. They said staff always complained. He asked if they understood that customers had been getting sick. They said that happens at every restaurant sometimes. That was the moment Gordon made his decision. He called a meeting with the entire staff, owners included, and the cameras kept rolling. Gordon stood at the front of the dining room, and everyone else gathered around tables that still had dirty plates and half-empty water glasses from the dinner service that had just ended. He started by addressing the staff directly. He told them that what he had found in the kitchen was not their fault. He said they had been put in an impossible situation, forced to choose between doing the right thing and keeping their jobs. He said that none of them should have been asked to serve food they knew was unsafe, and that the courage it took to speak up on camera was something he respected deeply. Then he turned to the owners. He said he had spent nearly 20 years working in restaurants, and he had seen every kind of problem imaginable. He had seen kitchens that were chaotic, disorganized, outdated, and inefficient. He had seen owners who were stubborn, delusional, financially reckless, and completely out of touch with their customers. But what he had never seen, what he had never encountered in all his years of doing Kitchen Nightmares, was a restaurant where the owners knew exactly what they were doing wrong and simply did not care. He said he would not redesign their dining room. He would not create a new menu. He would not do a relaunch. He would not put his name anywhere near this business. He told them that the restaurant was not salvageable, not because the building was bad, or the location was wrong, or the concept was flawed, but because the people running it had no respect for their customers, their staff, or the basic principles that make a restaurant trustworthy. And then he said something that reportedly made the owners realize how serious he was. He said that if this restaurant stayed open, if they continued serving food the way they had been, someone was going to get seriously hurt. Not just sick, but hospitalized. Or worse. And when that happened, when the lawsuits started and the investigations began, everyone associated with this place would be held accountable, including him, including the Kitchen Nightmares production team, including Fox. He said he would not let that happen. He said that as far as he was concerned, this restaurant should close its doors tonight and not reopen until every single thing in that kitchen had been replaced. Every surface had been sanitized. Every piece of equipment had been inspected. And every member of the staff had been retrained on proper food safety. And even then, he was not sure it would be enough. The owners were furious. They stood up, shouting that Gordon had no right to tell them what to do with their business. They said he had signed a contract, that he was obligated to finish the episode, that walking away would be a breach of his agreement with the network. They accused him of sabotaging them, of making them look bad on purpose, of ruining their reputation for the sake of drama. Gordon let them shout. He did not interrupt. He did not argue. He just stood there, arms crossed, waiting for them to finish. When they finally stopped, he said one more thing. He said that their reputation was not his responsibility, that they had ruined it themselves the moment they decided to serve rotten food to people who trusted them, and that if they wanted to sue him, they were welcome to try. But they should know that he had hours of footage documenting every health violation, every spoiled ingredient, every lie they had told. And that footage would be turned over to the health department, the network's legal team, and anyone else who needed to see it. The room went silent. Gordon looked at the production team and told them to pack up. He looked at the staff and told them they should start looking for new jobs because this place was not going to survive. And then he walked out of the restaurant, got into the car waiting outside, and left. The crew followed him. The owners stood in the middle of the dining room, surrounded by cameras that were no longer filming, and realized that Kitchen Nightmares was done. The production team packed up their equipment in silence. According to crew members who were there, nobody spoke during the drive back to the hotel. They had filmed dozens of Kitchen Nightmares episodes where Gordon lost his temper, where owners refused to listen, where restaurants seemed beyond saving. But this felt different. This felt like they had documented something that should not have existed in the first place. The episode was never finished. The footage that did exist was logged, archived, and then buried. The network's legal team reviewed everything that had been recorded, and their conclusion was swift and unanimous. Airing this material would be a liability nightmare. Showing a restaurant actively serving spoiled food, with owners admitting to ignoring health violations and using Kitchen Nightmares as a publicity stunt, could expose Fox to lawsuits from multiple directions. The restaurant could sue for defamation, even though everything was documented on camera. Former customers who had gotten sick could sue, claiming the network knew about the violations and did nothing. The staff could sue, arguing they had been put in danger for the sake of entertainment. And health departments could investigate why the show had not reported the violations immediately instead of trying to turn them into an episode. So the decision was made. The episode would not air. It would not be mentioned in promotional materials. It would not be included in season recaps. It would effectively cease to exist, at least as far as the public was concerned. But the people who worked on Kitchen Nightmares never forgot it. They talked about it as the episode that changed everything, the one that made them realize the show had limits, that there were some situations where good television and responsible journalism were fundamentally incompatible. After that, the screening process for new restaurants became more rigorous. Producers started doing more background research before committing to a location. They started asking more questions about health inspection history, customer complaints, and staff turnover. And they started including clauses in contracts that gave Gordon the right to walk away if conditions were too dangerous to continue. Gordon himself, according to people close to him, was shaken by the experience in ways that were not immediately obvious. He continued doing Kitchen Nightmares for another season and a half, but his approach shifted. He became more cautious, more suspicious, less willing to give owners the benefit of the doubt. In episodes that aired after the banned incident, you can see moments where Gordon seems to catch himself, where he looks at a walk-in fridge or a storage area with an expression that suggests he is remembering something he would rather forget. And there were restaurants he refused to film, locations that producers thought would make great television, but Gordon vetoed after doing his own research. He never explained his reasoning publicly, but people who worked with him understood. He had drawn a line. He would not participate in another situation where his presence could be used to legitimize a business that should not exist. The restaurant itself, according to public records, closed in late 2013, less than a year after Gordon's visit. The exact reason for the closure is not documented in any official capacity, but local health department records show that the establishment was issued multiple citations in the months following the failed Kitchen Nightmares taping. Former customers later posted reviews online describing experiences that matched what Gordon had found. People getting sick, finding foreign objects in their food, noticing smells and textures that did not seem right. One review mentioned that the restaurant had briefly advertised that it had been visited by Kitchen Nightmares, but that the signs came down after a few weeks and were never mentioned again. Why? Because showing a restaurant actively serving spoiled food, admitting to ignoring health violations, and confessing that they were using Kitchen Nightmares as a publicity stunt could open the network up to lawsuits. It could trigger health department investigations. It could lead to questions about why the show had not reported the violations immediately instead of trying to turn it into an episode. And it could make Kitchen Nightmares look complicit in allowing a dangerous restaurant to keep operating just for the sake of content. So the episode disappeared. It was never aired. It was never officially acknowledged. And when fans started asking about it years later, after rumors began circulating online, the network and Gordon's team stayed silent. But people who worked on Kitchen Nightmares remember it. They talk about it as the episode that changed everything. After that, Gordon reportedly became far more cautious about which restaurants he agreed to visit. He started asking more questions up front, doing more research before cameras ever rolled. And he made it clear to producers that if he walked into another situation like that, he would shut it down again, regardless of the consequences for the show. The restaurant itself, according to public records, closed within a year of Gordon's visit. Whether that was because of financial problems, health department action, or the fallout from the failed Kitchen Nightmares taping remains unclear. But people in the neighborhood reportedly said that customers had been complaining for months before Gordon ever showed up, and that it was only a matter of time before something forced the place to shut down. The banned episode, if it still exists in some archive at the network, would likely never be released. The legal risks are too high. The reputational damage to everyone involved would be severe. And there is an ethical question about whether airing footage of a restaurant actively endangering public health would be responsible journalism or exploitation. But the story raises larger questions about the restaurant industry and the reality television that covers it. How many other restaurants were operating in similarly dangerous conditions? How many were using television appearances as a way to distract from serious problems rather than actually addressing them? And how much responsibility do shows like Kitchen Nightmares have when they discover that a business is not just struggling but actively harmful? Gordon Ramsay has built a career on being brutally honest. He does not sugarcoat his opinions, and he does not let failing restaurants hide behind excuses. But the banned episode reportedly showed him confronting a reality that even he was not fully prepared for. The reality that some businesses are not worth saving, that some owners are not looking for help, and that sometimes the most honest thing you can do is walk away and let the consequences play out. At 58 years old, Gordon Ramsay is still making television. He still visits struggling restaurants, still yells at incompetent chefs, still tries to turn failing businesses around. But people who have worked with him say he is different now, more skeptical, more aware of the limits of what reality television can actually accomplish, and more willing to walk away when a situation feels wrong. The banned episode of Kitchen Nightmares is a ghost story in the world of food television. Everyone in the industry has heard about it. Some people claim to have seen parts of the footage, but nobody talks about it publicly. And the network would prefer it stayed that way. Because the truth about that episode is not that it showed something too shocking for television. It is that it showed something too real. It showed a restaurant that had been failing for so long, ignoring so many warnings, putting so many people at risk, that the only responsible thing to do was refuse to participate in the fiction that it could be fixed in a week with a new menu and some fresh paint. And that does not make for good television. That makes for a lawsuit, a scandal, and a reminder that behind every restaurant struggling to survive, there might be owners who do not deserve to. So what did Gordon Ramsay really find in that kitchen that shut down Kitchen Nightmares? What was in the footage that was too dangerous to air? And what does it say about the food we eat and the places we trust? That a restaurant like that could operate for as long as it did before someone finally said enough? The answers are probably sitting in a vault somewhere, labeled as unusable, too risky, never to be seen. And maybe that is for the best, because some stories are not meant to entertain, they are meant to warn. And the warning from that banned episode is simple. Not every struggling restaurant deserves to be saved. Some of them deserve to be shut down. What do you think Gordon really saw that made him walk away? And if that footage ever surfaced, would you want to watch it? Or would you rather not know how bad things can get behind the kitchen door? Let us know in the comments. And if this story changed the way you think about the restaurants you trust, make sure to subscribe for more untold stories from the world of food and television.